talking about Buddhism, one can talk about so much, so many different things, from so many different angles, because the teaching of the Buddha is not only what is recorded in books, is not only what is taught at one particular time or place. The teaching of the Buddha is to do with life, everything in life. Everything to do with your life is related to the Dhamma, to the teachings of the Buddha. Because the teachings of the Buddha talk about the individual human being, what the individual human being experiences, what the individual human being creates, what the individual human being wishes for, what the individual human being is afraid of, and on and on and on. So that the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, touches on everything, related to everything in life. So in actual fact, it depends on whom one is talking with as to what one will talk about. One can be talking about, say, the political situation in Australia, and still possible to make that a Dhamma talk, if one is skillful enough. One could be talking about the economics of Australia, that could be a Dhamma talk. But the easiest way to talk about Dhamma is to come back to the common experience of most of us, something that we can relate to. Most of you here, or nearly all of you here this evening, are lay people, married, some of you, dealing with relationships, the problems associated with relationships, the problems associated with life in general. We all want happiness, but so much of life is fraught with difficulty, especially in a relationship. You have one person, enough problems already. You bring another one together, bring two people together, double the number of difficulties. This is because within ourselves we still have so much doubt, so much pettiness. The mind can be very petty. Even though we're Buddhist, or I think most of you here would probably call yourselves Buddhist, and you would probably have quite a high ideal of what you would like to be. You know what you would like to be. You know what the ideal being should be. You know what all the good qualities are. You know what the Buddha praised. That's no big problem, we know that. But to live those qualities, to be that ideal, or to approach that ideal, is much more difficult. And quite often that leads to even a greater amount of suffering, greater frustration. In actual fact, sometimes spiritually inclined people suffer even more than just ordinary worldling people who are not at all concerned with religion or doing good. Why is that? Because when you have already the intention to develop goodness, to develop skillfulness, to develop the noble qualities, and then you find that you can't live up to that ideal, you feel twice the amount of suffering or frustration, unless you also have right understanding, right view. To aspire to be good, to aspire to be pure, without a good foundation in right attitude can be a lot of suffering. Meditation without right attitude can be a lot of suffering. Anything that one undertakes without right understanding is a lot of suffering. So I was very fortunate when I went to Thailand and ordained as a monk, because I went to live with a very well-known teacher, Venerable Ajahn, with whom I stayed a long time, about 10 years. And I say I was fortunate, not only because of having the opportunity to live with such a wonderful teacher, but also because of his approach to teaching was very suited to my temperament. And if I had to summarize Ajahn Chah's teachings, or what he emphasized most of all, I could do so by saying that primarily he emphasized over and over again right attitude. Tried to always guide the attitude of the disciple so that it would become right attitude, right view, right outlook. Because this is, after all, the most important step on the path to practice. That's why it is the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path. Even though the Eightfold Path is usually represented as a wheel, which means that every factor on that path is interdependent and supporting each other, and you can begin anywhere really. But it's good to start with right view, because if you don't have right view, then everything else will be wrong. Everything you do, you try to keep the morality, and there will be problems. You try to make effort, and the effort won't reap good results. You try to practice meditation, and usually it's just a lot of suffering. And I experienced that in my first year as a monk. Before I went to stay with Venerable Ajahn Chah, I made a lot of effort because I was very greedy. I wanted to become, if not enlightened, at least to attain some deep concentration very quickly, because after all I was a busy man. I had a lot of things to do and I couldn't waste my time being a monk for too long meditating. I mean, you've only got a certain amount of time after all. So I was very energetic in my practice. 3 or 4 months I did nothing but sit, walk, stand, and lay down for the minimum time for sleep each night. Wouldn't allow myself to lay down any other time except for the 4 or 5 hours during the night. And the rest of the time completely devoted to meditation. Sitting, walking, standing were the 3 postures that we used in this monastery. I thought, after a while, bathing is a waste of time. I'll dispense with that one, so I decided not to bathe. Gave up bathing for a month. After that it got a bit too much for me. I gave in. But I tried to put away any form of distraction, what I considered distraction. Put away any unnecessary activity I felt was unnecessary and a waste of time. Washing my robes and so going on alms round, I dispensed with that. Anything like that I was asked to do which was not formal meditation, I just really resented and did everything possible to avoid. Devoting myself to this meditation practice. A lot of effort. If I can say that I can say, I think quite honestly, that I made quite a lot of effort that rains retreat and after the rains retreat. But I can also honestly say that my mind did not become peaceful once. During all that effort, all that striving. So at the end of this retreat, and a few months after, towards the end of the year, I decided to go back to Ajahn Chah's monastery to visit him. And I explained what I'd been doing, and he listened patiently, and he said, yes, a lot of effort, no wisdom. And wisdom here is to do with right view, right attitude. That is a factor which we call wisdom. And it was quite true. My effort was very selfish, very obsessive. My mind was obsessed with gaining. How could it possibly become peaceful? An obsessed mind is never peaceful. I was always concerned about how much time I had been spending and how much time I had left. And a mind preoccupied with the past and the future can never become concentrated in the present. So that my meditation was a source of suffering. disappointment and frustration. Why? Because of wrong view. And this is the same with anything else that we undertake in our lives, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, anything. Unless you have right view, it will bring about suffering, it will bring about frustration. So Ajahn Chah's teaching emphasized from the very beginning having a right attitude towards life, and for monks in particular towards the monkhood, towards the discipline, towards the practice of meditation. That was the very foundation, right attitude. On that foundation he then emphasized very much developing a form which is beautiful, if you like to say, a form which is lovely, beautiful, or a form which is based on goodness. This normally is called some sila, morality, if you wish to call it. For monks it's the vinaya. It's a way of living your life, using your body, using your speech, which is beautiful. It's not a commonly used word these days. Beautiful meaning that it's pleasant, it's conducive to well-being, it's conducive to joy, harmony. So this is a foundation that Ajahn Chah emphasized, based on right view, developing morality. And this is very important in the West, I think, because for most people who come into Buddhism, we tend to have a lopsided view of Buddhism. So you hear of, say, practicing meditation, developing equanimity, especially people I noticed who came across Zen Buddhism, develop a very lopsided view, don't have time for morality. Everything, after all, Buddhism is to transcend good and bad. So why the need to do anything good? Buddhism is to develop equanimity. Buddhism is to develop letting go, non-attachment. So why bother attaching to good? Why bother doing good at all? That is wrong view. Because in actual fact, if one is striving for the ultimate, which is enlightenment, you need the foundation of morality, living a wholesome life with little complexity, little disharmony. That's the value of morality. So Ajahn Chah taught right view, morality, and then based on that he occasionally talked about meditation. Very different to where I had been previously, which was very much stressed on just the meditation, doing meditation. As far as the form, discipline, not so, it didn't matter so much. You could do more or less what you wanted, within limits of course. And as far as right view, it was never taught to me. It seemed that it wasn't necessary. It seemed that all you had to do was sit meditation, everything would be alright. But it wasn't obviously alright. It wasn't, because of right view missing. So this is something for us to reflect on. So what is this right view for yourselves? What is right view? Is there any view which is right view? From the absolute point of view, all views are relative. Relatively skillful, relatively unskillful, relatively correct, relatively incorrect. The only person who has perfectly right view, in inverted commas, is an enlightened being. Everybody else has only relatively correct view. But there are some right views which are relatively better for your life, depending on what you're aiming at. Now, if you're aiming for peace and harmony, you have to understand how to use your body and speech. Relationships are difficult. living together is difficult. We have these ideals and we can't live up to them. We have ideals of ourselves, expectations, we can't live up to them. We have ideals and expectations of other people. Some of us have very high ideals for other people, expect them to be so much, expect them to live up to so much. And of course, reality is never the ideal. And it leads to disappointment. How many times have you been disappointed with someone else? And how many times have you been disappointed with yourself? This is all due to wrong view. A lack of understanding of how life really is. Having this ideal, it doesn't serve you a good purpose. It actually serves you, it does harm. Because having this ideal, you then have more suffering in life. Having an ideal is quite good. Don't mistake what I'm saying. Having the ideal of purity, of nobility, to work towards is a beneficial thing. It gives you something to aim at, a direction to go. But then also understand that you are not there yet. And so you have to be able to accept reality as it is now. That means you have to be very humble. Humble humility is equivalent to equanimity. Equanimity and humility are the same thing. Humility means that you can accept limitations, accommodate limitations. Equanimity is that. You can be equanimous within the limitations that are there. So you look at yourself and then you look at your ideal, and there is a big separation, big space. But you're humble enough to accept that and to allow that for now. It doesn't always have to be that. You look at your meditation and you think of the ideal meditation experience that you've read about, heard about, and there is a big difference. But you are humble enough to allow that limitation for now. You look at someone else and you think of the ideal person, but they should be like that ideal, but they're not. There is a big gap there. So you're humble enough to allow the gap, to allow the conditions as they are now. In other words, this is becoming so humble that you're able to accept reality as it is. That's a very difficult thing to do. Most of us can't do it. And that we can't do it only indicates that we're very arrogant. A truly humble person accepts reality. It doesn't mean that you give up any effort. The reality is just for this moment. From this moment, what you do with this reality is up to you and the effort that you make. So in your relationships, for instance, husband and wife, quite often there is so much difficulty. Why? Well, you've got two deluded people. And actually it's more than two people. There's you, and what you think you are, and then there's the other person, and what you think they are, and reverse that. There's what we think of ourselves, what the other person thinks of ourselves, and then what we really are. And they're all very different. Because you have different ideals, different expectations. So for a relationship to be peaceful or harmonious, even to just a little bit, just to a minimum degree, it requires a lot of patience. A lot of patience. You have to be humble enough to allow failings in yourself, allow failings in the other person. If you have such high expectations in your relationships, you can't allow failings, then of course it's impossible, it won't last. The same with your relationship with your meditation. If you have such high expectations from your meditation, you hear things and then you want it to be just like you've heard, what you have expected. When it's not, you're disappointed and you don't meditate again. Don't have any patience. So patience, the Buddha greatly praised as being one of the greatest virtues. Because patience is the thing which enables you to accept the situation, and it's only through accepting the situation can you work with it, can you improve on it. Openness is very important. An openness, honesty. Traditionally, that's also one of the paramittas. Honesty, truthfulness. In a relationship, what that means is that you're able to speak quite openly to each other. Doesn't mean that you're always browbeating each other, pointing out each other's faults, tearing each other apart. That's not openness. That's just being oppressive. Openness means that you have enough confidence in yourself and in the other person and your relationship that you can express some doubt, some concern, some disagreement, according to what is proper in time and place, finding the suitable ways of doing them. This is something which is not very common in the Eastern cultures. In Thailand, people are they just don't like to speak frankly or directly. It doesn't mean they lie, I'm not saying that. What it means is that people don't like confrontation. And so they do anything to avoid a confrontation, which means they always beat around the bush. They talk around something, they hint at something, so that it makes it very difficult to know where you stand sometimes. Western people tend to be the opposite. It's just so aggressively, just so direct sometimes that it's rude. Now what this openness means is that you're sensitive, but you're not afraid to bring things out in the open so that they can be resolved. If there's two people, you're living together, there's bound to be disagreements, there's bound to be irritations. So openness is very necessary in order to resolve things, rather than hiding them and carry them around, skeletons in your closet, which in the end just accumulate. Small irritations, small grudges, accumulating over a long period of time can become the source of an explosion, the source of great strife. This is openness in a relationship, and of course you can internalize that in your own meditation. Without openness, meditation is impossible. Unless you're willing to open up to yourself, willing to be honest with yourself, willing to see what is there, meditation is utterly impossible. You can't meditate, you can't do it, because you just won't allow the mind to settle down. Settling down of the mind means that things can start coming up. As you stop busying the mind, as you stop preoccupying the mind with all sorts of activities and sensory perception, then things can start coming up. And unless you're willing to allow that to happen, willing to be open, willing to be honest with yourself, then you just can't. You can't stop. You will just continually preoccupy the mind. Some people can't sit still. Some people physically can't sit still. And I quite often see that that's a symptom of their inability to just settle down. Allow the mind to settle down and allow things to come up. This great fear of emptiness, great fear of silence, great fear of loneliness. Why? Because of the fear of seeing oneself. The inability to be completely open with oneself, honest with oneself. You know that it's a way of torturing people. You take their clothes off and lock them in an empty room, completely empty. In other words, there's nothing in there at all to distract them, just by themselves. Solitary confinement. That's the toughest form of torture you can invent, especially for a Western mind. But why is that unpleasant, or why is that frightening? Simply because the person is afraid of oneself, being with oneself, and what is in the mind. Unable to allow, unable to accept, unable to look, unable to be honest and open. Now this is a very important quality. If you wish a relationship to develop and relationship to be reasonably harmonious, not only do you have to be patient, but you also have to be very open. If you wish your meditation to develop and be fruitful, then also you need tremendous patience. And you need this quality of openness, quality of honesty. Honesty here meaning that you're quite willing to allow what is there, see what is there, without trying to paint it a different color, without trying to avoid it. And of course that shouldn't be too difficult if you have right view, right attitude, because you know that everything, whatever physical or mental state, is not you. It's really not you. So what do you have to be afraid of? There's really nothing permanent there, nothing about you which is permanent. You may have certain characteristics for now, you may have certain thoughts for now, you may have certain states of mind for now, but they're not you. They are part of your personality if you wish, but they are not all of you, and you don't have to be that all the time. So that you can allow these things to be, allow them to come, and allow them to go. So you can be open. The same in your relationships. You don't have such an invested interest in having to be this way or having to be that way, or I have to be right or you have to be wrong. An openness willing to see, willing to change, willing to try and change, willing to adapt and compromise. And you know that it is possible, because there's nothing in you that is permanent. No character trait that has to be, no character trait that is fixed. Some people say, well, I am just like that. You're not just like that. There are many, many parts to one person, many, many different qualities. And all these qualities can be adapted, can be changed, can be improved on if necessary. Things which are disruptive, things which are not conducive to harmony can be abandoned. Things which are conducive to harmony, beneficial, can be strengthened and developed. It's quite simple, but it requires patience, it requires openness, and it requires some effort, making sufficient effort. The Buddha said that effort was a requirement, a necessary part of the path, something which we don't have sometimes. We can't make the effort without being motivated. And unfortunately the only way that we Westerners know, the only sort of motivation that we know, seems to be either desire or aversion. It's easy to be motivated when you have strong desire. It's easy to be motivated when you have strong aversion. And we use this over and over again. You hang a carrot in front of the horse, and the horse will run. The same with us, of course. If you start telling yourself of all the benefits and all the things that you can gain, desire arises and you're motivated. Or if you feel lazy and your meditation is not going so well, or you can't get up in the morning for meditation, or can't get up to go to work, then how do you motivate yourself? Most Western people start getting really angry at themselves. You're useless, good for nothing, slob, really lazy, incompetent. Start really getting into yourself, criticizing, developing negative thoughts, using anger to motivate you to do something. Both of these forms of motivation are unskillful, and they are not useful. Not useful at all. for one whose mind is clear, sufficiently clear, one knows what the right effort is. One does it. Simply that. No need to create anything extra. Right effort means simply doing what needs to be done. Not out of aversion, not out of desire. Simply doing what needs to be done at the time and place. That is right effort. And that is all the effort that is required for life and for meditation. So these three qualities I think are always very important: patience, honesty and effort. But they all must be based on right view. Having a sufficiently right view to know how to use what you have. Without that, whatever you try to do usually doesn't work out so well. On this hot night, I think I've said as much as I can. Maybe you can ask some questions now, more fruitful. Thank you.
Would you like a cold drink?
Could you? No, thank you. Could you put that fan on? Very hot.
It's just seeing if you have a wrong view, make you get right view, or how do you, you can see that you've got wrong view, but how does it, even if you want to try and get rid of wrong view, then that's to get something too. How do you,
Just seeing, just being aware. Just be aware. If you're aware of wrong view, then that automatically is sufficient. See, just being aware of wrong view. If you're aware of wrong view, then you don't have wrong view anymore. It's when you're not aware that it's wrong view, that you believe that view and you're lost in that view, that you have wrong view. I can't see how you can continue to have wrong view if you're aware that it's wrong view. Myself, it's a bit difficult for me to understand that. I'm not sure how it could be. Maybe you mean like, if you think, well, the Buddha said that to believe in a self is wrong view. But I still I still strongly feel I have self. But that's wrong view. You're aware of it as a view. So it's in that moment of awareness, that wrong view has actually lost its power. I think we're in the way. Now what really, if one wishes to go into it more deeply though, right view, really perfect view, is not a view in the sense of a thought. It is that knowing awareness, that quality of knowing that all views, all thoughts, all stands, all point of views are not right. In other words, knowing the limitations of all conditions. Everything that is conditioned is always relative. A view can never be perfect. A view here in the conventional sense. A view here in a sort of a thought. I have the view that it's hot here. Is that right? It's just another view. It's never perfect. Because it's relative. What is hot? Somebody else feels that it's not hot. How can I be right if they're right? Because it is all relative. What is hot? If you want it to be hotter than this, then this is cool. If you want it to be cooler than this is hot. That is the field of relativity. There is no absolute. What is long, what is short, or what is big and small, beautiful and ugly, it's all relative. So when we talk about right view, we can talk about the conventional right view, the right view based on the teachings of the Buddha, which says having a basic understanding of the Four Noble Truths, having an understanding of the law of karma, that all actions bring about a result, and the nature of the action determines the nature of result. This is conventionally right view, but it's still just thoughts. Just thoughts. Perfect right view is enlightened wisdom. That is perfect view, which is not a thought. It's just knowing the reality. If one has an appreciation for impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and non-self from a direct experience, then one has approaching right view. Until then, it's all intellectual, relatively good ideas. Like you may have you've been listening to Dhamma talks maybe for a long time, and you've thought things out. You have reasonably good views about Dhamma and about meditation. Relatively right views. But they are not perfect view. And so the practice is simply to become aware, and becoming more aware, realizing that everything, whether good thoughts or bad thoughts, relatively good view or relatively not good view, they're all impermanent. Everything.
One is intellect. Is it just a pure only the process of thinking? Is that right?
Well, I guess we'd have to check in the dictionary, but I personally, for myself, I see intelligence as an activity of the brain, in the sense of your ability to think, the speed of thinking associated with perception, the ability to interpret the information logically, the ability to construct sort of from this mental data. All of that amounts to intelligence, and it's all mental activity. It's all in the field of sankhara, the aggregate of sankhara and sanya.
So there should be some amount of awareness as well, is that right?
Awareness, you can be aware. You can be aware of that mental process. The mental process is this, all it is just thoughts. An intelligent person just can use that process better than one who's not intelligent, that's all. But basically it's all the same. This is why you can be very intelligent and quite unwise, or very unintelligent and very wise. Because the wisdom is actually understanding the nature of that pattern, those thoughts, the nature of sankhara, rather than just creating wonderful sankharas. Intelligence is purely within the conditioned realm. So that's why it's never a prerequisite, it's not a standard for anything very much. But one can say that the teaching of the Buddha, what he actually taught verbally, that is also in the field of conditioned reality. It's all conceptual. And so to understand, one who's intelligent may be able to understand that type of Dhamma, the Dhamma which is taught, spoken and written down more easily than one who's not so intelligent. That could be true. But then intelligence has its limitations as well. The more one can think, the more one does think. And the more one tends to believe one's thoughts, lost in intellectual speculation, philosophizing, relying so much on intelligence that it's very difficult for us to attune to just experiencing the reality. So quite often some teachers, meditation teachers, discourage the study. Ajahn was very much against study. Not because he thought that study was not useful. He saw a lot of value in having study monks. But he felt for the practice of the Dhamma, he felt that study tended to be a hindrance. Very, very different to some other teachers, of course. And he wouldn't allow study in his monastery. He said he tried it. He had it for a while, and he said the results that he saw were not good. And so he stopped it all. There was no study in his monasteries. The study was based on just the basics. And certainly as a monk you have to learn the discipline, so you learn that. And you have to know the basics of Dhamma. But I mean, how much Dhamma do you have to know? And the teacher teaches you this. And he said the study is within yourself. The Buddha, when he studied the body and mind. Then he taught. And this was written down in the books. What is in the books is right. It's a description of what the Buddha studied and what he saw. Now you too can, having known just the basics, you can also study the same books. Body and the mind. Now some people will argue that you can easily go astray unless you know the map very well. In other words, unless you've really studied and read the teachings of the Buddha. There's some truth to that as well, maybe. But it's good to remember that the Buddha, all those sermons of the Buddha that you find in the Sutta Pitaka, they were not given to one person. They say that Ananda heard every one of them, but I leave that open. I don't know. But for sure, they were not given to one person. They were given to a specific person or people at a specific time. So that obviously it is not necessary to read all those suttas. The Abhidhamma is actually disputed as to whether it actually was taught by the Buddha or not. Not that it's not the Buddha's teaching, not saying that, but it's generally accepted that the Buddha did not teach the Abhidhamma in that form, but rather that the Abhidhamma was extrapolated from his teachings in the sutta. Now, of course, this is all speculation, isn't it? Different people have different views about it. But I'm saying all of this to make one point, which is what Ajahn was saying, is that you don't need to learn so much theory in order to understand reality, because understanding reality is actually a process of looking within, seeing for yourself. The teaching is only pointing out sort of a few street signs for you. You've got to actually do the inward journey and see for yourself. And I do agree with Ajahn, and I have seen occasionally monks who have a lot of study behind them, very difficult to meditate, simply because they interpret everything. Oh, now this is this is approaching neighborhood concentration. And in that sense it becomes a hindrance. In no other sense, just in that sense. And of course, learning means a process of taking in. and a process of remembering, which is all cluttering the mind. I mean, you're filling the mind. Meditation is a process of clearing the mind. They're quite opposites. If you want to meditate, primary exercise is to learn to clear the mind. If you want to know what's in this house, if you really want to know what's in this house, the best way to do it is to take everything out. See what it is, get a close look at it, clean it up. If it's worthwhile, put it back in. That's the process of meditation. Cleaning out the house, seeing what is in there. Whereas what it is, get a close look at it, clean it up. If it's worthwhile, put it back in. That's the process of meditation. Cleaning out the house, seeing what is in there. Whereas studies are different, you're just putting more things in. So Ajahn Chah was not, he had nothing against study, he just felt that for monks who, for his own practice, and for monks who wanted to train under him, in that tradition he discouraged study, formal study. But that's not every teacher. It just depends on the teacher and what he feels is best for himself and his disciples. If one can combine, of course, if one practices and understands and combines that with study, I would imagine that would be very useful. Not for oneself, but rather for being able to communicate it. Like there is one teacher like that, Venerable Buddhadasa in Thailand. He's quite exceptional because of that. Very deep understanding through insight, through his practice, formal practice, but also very precise research into the source, the theoretical sources of the Tripitaka. And because of his own experience, he can really see what these meaning there. And so he's actually done a lot to revise the understanding of the theoretical teachings of the Buddha. And it's very beneficial for, I think, the Sangha in Thailand, study and the practice of Buddhism. But not many people. I say it depends on how gifted you are. If you can do both, fine. There's nobody here who's studying Abhidhamma. I always put my foot in it. Nobody in Perth is studying Abhidhamma. Yes, in Perth I put my foot in it every time I mention something about Christianity or women. Always get into trouble.
When I contemplate or get very introspective, is that a form of meditation?
How do you mean something?
Well, when I look deeply into myself, I don't like very much what I see, but yet I thoroughly enjoy being alone. I enjoy my own company, but yet I don't like what I see. That rather seems to me rather conflict.
Yes, obviously. But still, that means if you're able to do that, that still means that you have some sort of incentive to do it. Despite the fact that what you see, you may not like, but the fact that you're still willing to do that must mean that you have some sort of foundation, some sort of incentive. I don't. see within ourselves, it's not you. It's really not you. There are many, many, many aspects to you. And of course, our tendency, depending on, some people always look at their good qualities, some people always dwell on their bad qualities. But at least remember there are many, many different yous, different yous. And so, also remember that each one of these things you call you are not really, there's nothing real there, they're not really you after all. They're just changing conditions. And with that basis, you just relax with it all, and then gently make an effort. Certainly an effort must be made. The teaching of acceptance is so that you can be peaceful in the moment. And within that peaceful, you can establish a bit of awareness. And within that awareness, then you can make a bit of effort, and so that the skillful positive change can take place. It's like this lady who had cancer. I went to visit her. She was very sick, and she wanted to meditate. She looked as if she was going to die. And she'd been to this meditation teacher who had told her that she must, she's nearly on her way out. She'd better get a move on and make some effort. And sit at least, I think he says only 4 hours a day. And this was just a beginner, and she's never done any meditation. And she was so weak and just in pain that she could hardly sit up for 10 minutes. And so she was told to meditate 4 hours a day. And then she couldn't do that, and so she felt really awful. It was really awful because she couldn't do what she was supposed to do. And she didn't know, really in a bad state. So all I can suggest is to relax. And you don't have to do 4 hours a day. You don't even have to do, you don't have to do or have to be anything. This very moment, just relax with what is here. Just relax with what is here. You don't have to be the Buddha. You don't have to be enlightened. You don't have to be, just relax with what is here. Now what does that mean? Does it mean that you just become lazy and indolent? No, what it means is that because you've relaxed, you calm down, you can be a bit aware, for a moment anyway, which you can't be unless you relax and calm down. If you're so obsessed and worried about having to sit for 4 hours a day and I can't do it, there's no way, and you're not even aware for one moment. So the first thing is relax and just calm down, just with what is here, with all that, even if it's rotten, relax and calm down. And then establish a bit of awareness, because when you are relaxed and calm down, that means you can be aware, you can be a bit more aware. And then with that a bit more of awareness, maybe you'll see how to make a little bit of effort. Just a little bit of improvement, a little bit of effort. And slowly, because awareness is a crucial thing. So it's gentle, has to be. Gentleness. Yes. Yes.
That I can handle with gentleness like that.
Right. It depends on the temperament. If one tends to be very forceful in one's approach to things, then one has to develop a gentle side. I mean, like concentration on the breath, you can't do it unless you're gentle. You can't. But for people who tend to be very inclining towards laziness and indolence, sloth, carelessness, for those people you kind of stress, you kind of push and you kind of do it. That's one misunderstanding, because it is different for different people. And there are also sort of racial traits. Thai people in Thailand quite often tend to be very easygoing, very, very easygoing. So the Thai teachers, when they teach Thais, usually very forceful. really, really forceful. You gotta get in there and kill your defilements, tear them apart. This is war. This is not just play. And going on like, really, this is the Dhammadesana given, classical Dhammadesana given by Venerable Ajahn Mahabua, who is a very highly respected teacher in Thailand. It's just like that. It's war, and you've got to kill your defilements, crush them, destroy them, annihilate them. They're really exactly his word. And it's skillful means for people who are very kind of laid back and don't take that seriously. I mean, you just don't take it seriously. You don't go there and beat your head up against the wall. Guys don't do that. They just don't take it seriously. Most of them, this is generalizing. They don't take it, they kind of, their temperament is easy going. They don't take it seriously. And they really get uptight about it. Crush this, kill these people. It becomes so tense and negative that it's very unpleasant for them.
It becomes suppression.
Yes. Yes. Oh, suppression, oppression. Yes, tensions. So for Western people, not always, I mean we can only generalize so far, but I find that for Western people, quite often, well, not always, quite often it's good to stress more the gentle approach. Gentle. First thing is to establish some clarity, some awareness, which means you've got to calm down. And calm down and make the mind peaceful. Sitting here is my important. I have people coming and going, I don't know what's going on. I know what's going on. Can't help but feel that we're in the way. มีอะไรไหมโยม Right.
You don't really with their emotions if they're honest about things.
Yes.
So what would be the idea?
Well, meditation, just do it and reflect on your approach. That's the only way you'll come to the balance. Do it and reflect on the results of you doing it. Because if I tell you right view now means like making an effort, but you shouldn't be expecting too much results. It just becomes so complicated that it becomes really ties you up in knots. All I can really say for people wanting to meditate is, and certainly hear the instructions, then do it, then reflect on the results. If you find you're getting tense, if you find that you're becoming disappointed, reflect why. Tension in the body, headaches, why? Maybe too much effort. Disappointed, why? Because too much expectation. If you find you just sink into meditation, into a dull, not enough effort. If you just let the mind drift here, drift there, not enough direction. You must know that meditation, the aim of the meditation, tranquility meditation, calming meditation, is to slow the mind down, learn to concentrate. So there is a direction there. But this is just a balance that is only learned through doing and reflecting on the results of one's doing. The teacher may point out certain things to you, but really he can only be of value if he knows you well. Otherwise all he can teach you is just a technique. That's all he can teach you, just a technique, and tell you what to do, and then when you do it, what happens? And then he says, too far to the right, and go to the left. You go away, do some more, and too far to the left, go back to the right. That's all the teacher does. Based on he can help you interpret the results of your doing. Meditation is just like every other skill, it's just a matter of practice. The thing that is why it becomes a learning experience, an experience becomes a learning experience when you reflect on it and learn something from it. If you just have experience after experience after experience, it doesn't mean you're any wiser. But when you reflect on that experience, in other words, you've done the result, what? Reflect on this, what is it? So you've learned something from that experience. You sit meditation, do the exercise, what are you experiencing? At the end of the meditation, what's it been like? You reflect, you learn something from it. In that sense, no meditation is a waste of time. No session is a waste of time. Even the most horrible meditation session can be very beneficial because you can learn something from it by reflecting on it. And through this reflecting you learn to find the balance. You learn to find the right effort, the right view in your practice. That's the only way I know. That's the only way. That's the only way I learn. And I couldn't. Anything else is always relative to the person, you see. And kind of never, it doesn't really have practical significance for one. You'll never know what right effort is. You just won't. Just by thinking about it and analysing it and hearing people talk about right effort. Right effort, and you can read it in the book, what right effort is. Right effort is to stop the arising of unwholesome states, eliminate the unwholesome states that have already arisen, to cultivate the arising or to cause the arising of wholesome states, and to sustain the wholesome states that have arisen. That's right effort. That's in the books. Sometimes I give a whole Dhammadesana. But that means nothing really. How do you do that? Still, sure, everybody knows that. Kind of trying to develop goodness, so effort is in that direction, but what is right effort in the sense of a balance between lax, sloppy, tense, suppression, oppression? What is that effort? That's something that only comes through experience, reflecting on the experience. And one finds that right effort is quite different to what one may have thought it to be.
Isn't reflecting on the experience after meditation a judgment? How can you be sure that what you're saying about this meditation is, it could be completely up to you?
Well, reflecting here is done with awareness. You just kind of observe. That's what it is, and observing. And of course, there is if you do get caught up in judging, you're back in speculation again. But this is it's a little bit deeper than just thinking about it. It's not just judging, but it's just seeing, like, all right, you sit meditation. You sat meditation for half an hour. What's happened? You just kind of reflect, observe, what you experience. If you're sitting there dull, I can't remember. 30 minutes went really quickly. I can't remember anything actually. I wonder what this bump on my forehead is. Sometimes it is like that. Time goes so quickly you can't remember anything, and not because you were in a deep concentration. Just obviously, it was a dull meditation. So you can say that's passing a judgment, all right. But still, you've learned that maybe you're not putting enough effort.
be a fine line between judgment and awareness?
Well, I was going to say that the awareness is a continuous thing, where then you reflect on your judgment as well. You know that it's a judgment. I mean, you can know that it's a judgment. Awareness is a moment thing. If you are aware now, and this is you're trying to develop. It's just a knowing now. So if you make a judgment, then you know that that is a judgment, obviously.
The awareness is knowing that it is a judgment.
The awareness is only in the now. Only in the now. But I mean, keep it, even if it is just a reflection into like thinking reflection. Even if you just sit here and say, now what? I wonder why I've got this headache. I mean, could it be that I'm just too much, maybe I'm putting too much force? And then when you sit, you kind of, what am I doing now? And you kind of feel your body, oh yes, I'm more tense around my neck. That's why I get headaches. I'm trying too hard maybe. Even if you can say, oh look, you're just thinking, alright. But there is thinking mixed in with observing the results of your effort. And it is useful for you. To a limit. I mean, obviously you're not going to start getting, don't take it too far. Everything one says is only true to a degree. If you take it too far, of course it's off. If you go and start thinking about everything you do, drink a glass of water, now what's the result of me drinking a glass of water? And this is what people do now. They hear about this, like people very much into psychology and psychiatry now, and about the mind and resolving things. And so they take that overboard. If you tell them to reflect, people take it overboard, far too far, and they sit there analysing themselves all the time. Analysing our marriage. What's wrong with our marriage? Why aren't we perfectly happy? Is it because you use that sort of toothpaste? Or is it? And just really analysing, thinking, and that's not reflection, that's just indulging in thinking, speculation. It's not useful. Reflecting here is coming back to the present moment and just observing. Just observing a little bit. If there is thought, it's minimal and it's very directed thought. And the actual observing doesn't require thought. Just observe. Like if I say something and you feel uneasy or a bit shocked, a bit angry, and then I say, stop. What is that? And you can start analysing yourself. Oh, now why did I get angry? Or you can just stop and look and just feel it, and immediately you can know directly what happened there. There's no thought. I mean, once you see, then you can put a name to it. It's because he said that really reminded me of this. And then you analyse it and put thought to name it all. But that actual observing is a stop and look there. That's not thinking. That is direct observing. That is reflecting. Afterwards you try to put it into words to explain it to yourself. And just try it. Sometimes. For me it works very well. Because I used to get so, in my early years as a monk, I mean there are so many things around unresolved. And I'd be always put into very difficult situations. Tremendous frustration, tremendous anger, tremendous jealousy and resentment. And because I was so cut off, I mean, living in quite isolation, couldn't really speak with anybody else, it was awful. These become very intense. And I used to meditate, but I found that during the meditation I could never resolve anything. Because I was always busy trying to do something. I was always trying to concentrate my mind on my breath or my mantra or doing my yoga. I mean, something I was busy. But I learned quite a useful thing. I used to go back whenever something really happened. I used to go back and lay down on my right hand side, like the Buddha. I just lay there, not try to do anything, just be empty. I just stop. I just stop doing anything, and inevitably, I would see very clearly. It's just my mind would be clearly attuned to what the problem was, not in thought patterns, but just more like feelings. Like, jealousy is a very good one. If you know, quite often, just a feeling of jealousy. So stop. There's all the surface thing of all the reasons why, and he's like that or she's like that. But then, if you just stop and catch it, you recognize what it is. There's a deeper level, below the thought patterns, below the reasoning, deeper to feeling. And just a little, just catch it within you. You can reflect and you observe what the real reason, the cause of it is. It's more of a feeling than a thought. And that is the only reason I speak about this, is to give you a little bit more of a appreciation of how to get in tune to what's going on within. There's nothing, there's nothing complex really. It sounds as if it may be something complex. There's nothing like that at all. It's just a matter of being able to look a bit more deeply, instead of thinking but looking, reflecting. I think. But with a peaceful mind, all things become clear. And with the mind that is still busy, nothing is clear. So invest some time in patiently working, calmly working, relaxed work. Make the mind calm, peaceful, clear. Everything becomes much clearer, simpler. And once the mind is simple, everything is simple. Once the mind is clear, everything is clear.
Does wisdom necessarily arise in a peaceful way?
Not necessarily. But wisdom, peaceful mind is the doorway through which wisdom can come in. It may not come in right away. And you can't really force it. Not insight, not true insight. You can't really force it. Insight arises spontaneously. But if you've got the door open, it can come in. If the door is closed, it's very difficult. Making the mind calm and peaceful and developing this openness and this presence, that means that you are increasing the possibility or the probability, the possibility that you're increasing the probability of the arising of insight. Ajahn says that insight arises spontaneously. Ajahn teaches that wisdom or insight is something that arises spontaneously. All you can do is prepare the ground. If there is no mind, Is there a universe? I'll try and strike another Zen fire for you if you don't mind that. So when I'm tired is when my mind starts doing all sorts of silly things.
How can one say that there is no self? I know I am me, so what's this no self all about?
Simply because the majority, or nearly all beings, have this ingrained instinct, I am. And the environment and the conditions reinforce that concept, I am, all the time. And because we take it for granted, that is the very reason why the Buddha taught not self. Now, not self is another concept. It's not reality. It's not truth. This is something greatly misunderstood by many Buddhist people, because we forget that the teaching of the Buddha was a skillful means. What he taught were concepts pointing to the truth, but not the truth. Not self, that is another concept. It's a word. It cannot be the real. But it's a corrective concept to correct the very ingrained, obsessive idea, I am. Something we take for granted. If you are saying, you must think that I am this, I am that. So what the Buddha did was to point say, not self, meaning that you must stop and question, why? And who am I? If I am, then who am I? What am I? So that this will be again the start of the seeking, the start of the inquest, or the quest to find the reality, to find the truth for oneself, which is really beyond duality, beyond self or not self, beyond concept and thought. So that this is, I think, why the Buddha stressed not self. But if we want to now understand not self, the reality cannot be understood through concepts. It cannot be understood through thought. It cannot be reasoned out. But as an aid to you and to others who are struggling with this teaching of not self, I will use a few concepts which may be of value in straightening out or directing you in the right way. Now when we say not self, usually anatta is the Pali word, and we usually enlarge it and say not me, not mine. Not me, not mine. Not self, not belonging to self. And now this is something which can be thought about in a way which will be of value to you. So, what do you consider as yourself? Who are you then? Are you this body? Now when you ask that question, you should reflect. Are you this body? You can objectify that you're the body. You can be aware. You can see the body. So obviously, if you can objectify something, it cannot be you. If I can see you sitting there, you cannot be me. If I can see thoughts arising and passing away in my mind, then those thoughts cannot be me. If I can see feelings coming and going, then those feelings cannot be me. And so, because you can objectify all conditions, all states, you can objectify them. You can see them coming and going, so they cannot be you. Then they cannot be yours because you have no true control. You have no power to make this body do what you want it to. You have no real power to completely control mental states, thoughts, feelings. They arise according to conditions. So because you have no complete control, they cannot be yours, because if they were yours, truly yours, you would control them according to your wishes, naturally. So even on this intellectual level, you can begin to get a feeling for anatta. Not me, because I can objectify it. Not mine, because I cannot really control it. But the reality must be realized through direct experience, and this is beyond concepts.
All our suffering, according to Buddhism, is caused by this notion we have in our heads of a permanent self. Can you explain why this notion we have should cause suffering?
Well, when there is a self, when you consider yourself a self, there must be something belonging to this self. And what belongs to this self? We have the body. This is my body. And of course the body, being an impermanent thing, does its thing. Sometimes it's healthy, then it's sick. When the body is sick, we are sick, and naturally we suffer. The body is born, it grows, it gets old. We become old. Naturally we suffer because old age is not pleasant. Sickness is not pleasant. Death is not pleasant. So there is fear and we are suffering. Because when the body is born, we are born. When the body is sick, we are sick. When the body is old, we become old. When the body dies, we die. And thus we suffer. The same with mental states, the same with all conditions. Because there is always the duality, there is always the opposites. There is the pleasant, the unpleasant. There is birth, there is death. That is the nature of conditioned existence. So when we take this as being me or mine, then naturally we must also be born and dying. We must be always exposed to both pleasant and unpleasant. And because we take the pleasant to be self, and the unpleasant also to be self, we're always trying to retain the pleasant, push away the unpleasant, and so we're always struggling. And this struggle is suffering. In other words, we cannot be at peace with reality, with existence, because of our invested interest. Because we have a self, we have an invested interest, a preference for one side of life and an aversion for the other side of life. Preference for the pleasant, aversion for the unpleasant. This leads to inner conflict, frustration, mental anguish, suffering, the dukkha that the Buddha pointed to. Now if one practices to realize the truth, transcend the attachment to self, transcend the view of self, then where is the invested interest? Body is old? The body is old, not me. The body is sick? The body is sick, not me. A pleasant experience? Just a pleasant experience. Not me, not mine. In other words, there is no problem. There is no suffering. There is no problem created by the mind. Life goes on as usual. Better than usual because you are not creating any unnecessary problem. You're able to live at peace with nature, acting in accordance with what is proper in time and place.
If we can understand intellectually that there is no self, why is it that we don't act accordingly?
Because the intellectual understanding is very superficial. What you know is far greater than what you can live. What you know is far greater than what you can do. What you know is not the same as what you can realize and understand deeply. So you can understand intellectually anatta, not self. You can understand the Four Noble Truths. They are intellectual concepts. You can understand it, but emotionally, within your being, you are not able to assimilate those truths. You are not able to live those truths. And so, you still are caught in the cycle of preference for the pleasant, the unpleasant, biases according to me and mine, and all the suffering that results from that. This is why Buddhism can never be just an intellectual exercise. Buddhism is a path to realize the truth. So it must be an experiential path, something that must be done and experienced deeply within oneself through direct seeing and direct knowing. Because the Buddha is the one who knows, not the one who thinks about it, not the one who reasons it. Buddha is the one who knows, direct knowing.
How can the no-self principle and the theory of rebirth be both integral parts of Buddhism? If there is no self, how can I be reborn?
You are not reborn. Who said that you are reborn? If you don't exist, how can you be reborn anywhere? True. But that does not mean that it excludes the process, the process of change, the process of cause and reaction. That is an impersonal law that functions. Whether there is a self or no self, that law operates. Now the fact that you want to limit it in the sense that I am now, so if I must be reborn, That's an extra factor that you are putting in. The process of rebirth is simply another expression of the process of dependent change, if you like to say. Change. Even today in physics, modern physics, if you ask a physicist, what is there? Usually all he can say is there is change. A continuous, dynamic, changing process. That is the reality. Change. But not in a haphazard sort of way, but rather according to causes, bringing about results. Causes bringing about results. This is a process which operates externally within the universe, operating within your body, operating on the mental level, operating on the moral level. It is a process which operates an impersonal level. No need for a self to be involved in that. So when we talk about rebirth, it just means the continuity of this flowing change, the continuity of the stream of cause and result. Now if we talk about you as an individual, all we can say is there is the individuality of this stream of causes and results, but no permanent entity within that stream, no permanent you within that stream, but there is the individuality of the stream, causes and results, causes and results. That is operating according to this law of karma or the law of causality without the need for a you. So there is no permanent entity, no individual permanent entity within the stream, but there is the individuality of the stream. In other words, your stream of causes and results is something which is peculiar to you, let us say, peculiar to this continuity of causes and results. That is what we call your karma. So that may help to make that point a bit clearer. I hope so anyway.
Do we have to believe in the Buddha's teaching of no self in order to follow his path? Surely belief in this fundamental principle which the Buddha discovered would help us greatly on the path.
Buddhism is not a religion based on belief, so belief is not a prerequisite. All that we can say is required is an openness of mind. Have an open mind about it. Instead of believing in non-self, all you are requested to have is don't have such a firm belief in self. In other words, keep an open mind. You may feel I exist, I am a self. Fine, you feel that. But at least have an open mind. Maybe that's not the truth. Because there are many things that you don't know yet. Many things that you have not experienced yet. So at least keep an open mind. This is really all that the Buddha requested. He did not request belief. To believe is really of no great advantage. It may make you feel safe and confident. You see in Christianity, or any religion which is based on belief, if a person has faith and belief, of course they feel good, and it will be of great benefit for them usually. It brings a lot of joy in their lives. But still, you're vulnerable, because what you believe doesn't mean that you know, it just means you believe it. Someone else may disagree with you, they may challenge you. You will always feel a bit threatened. And what you believe today, you may not believe tomorrow, because belief is another impermanent state. So in Buddhism we are not so concerned with whether you believe or disbelieve the teaching of not self, but rather would encourage you to have an open mind to this, not just believing self. Have a questioning mind. Maybe it is not self, and then seek for the truth, to realize the truth, that which is beyond belief, that which is beyond accepting on intellectual level, that which is a direct knowing for oneself.